So anyway, we decide on what it is we want to learn. We learn what that is, but we also learn what it takes for us to cope through learning with others. Now we could take the sound A, short A, ah, with the sound of R and T in the word art. Art says math, science, English, history, chemistry, biology, French, Spanish. Art says those words as well in pronunciation. The thing about art is that, in my opinion, art is about as well as we can get to knowledge, brilliance, articulation, and experience intrapersonal intelligently. I think when people come together, each person makes up this group. That's a form, singularly, of art. It doesn't matter what the subject is. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It doesn't matter how long that congregation or that gathering takes to disperse, or for each person, in other words, to go his or her own respected way. It doesn't have anything to do with being right or being wrong, settling for the reason, or accepting the purpose. I think it's art, and I think in that respect of art, in that kind of context, it's like a ball of clay. If you have a ball of clay, you know you have a ball of clay, and you come up with things you could do with it, images you could make, but you don't assume that ball of clay to be more or less a ball of clay before you actually make one of those images. That says we go through a transformation process, but in that process it's not us that's transforming. It's where we think something else is transforming, and we like to know eventually how that happens, or how that's implied, and why. You take a ball of clay, make a bowl, or a mug, a cup, or a plate, or a rod, or a cane, like a cane-shaped thing. And it's all of a sudden not a ball of clay anymore. No one virtually will be able, and probably wouldn't be willing, to convince you or persuade you, or any of us, that it's frankly not a ball of clay that's been sculpted or manicured into, or kneaded into, the object that it's become, or that it resembles fairly. In our mind, we know well off it is a ball of clay, and articulately we transformed it. Also, since we have the learning experience to share with others, it's possible that someone else can explain transformation regarding it in a different way, from a different perspective, frankly. That's how articulation serves us. We generate energy from within. Talk about producing energy, generating energy, and not talking about something that we can physically put our hands on. That's the reason we're able to use or apply articulation and be articulate in that respect, and be able to articulate in retrospect. It boils down to things we learn being either the same or being different from how we learn. When it comes to this kind of truth and this kind of honesty, as well as this kind of integrity and this sense of diversity, the continuous, the infinite. So, as we do learn things, and we've been taught how to speak or to talk, theoretically, early on, we being able to make the sounds, project our voice or vocals from within out, might be responsible for how we learn and what it is we learn ultimately, though many will contend that what is information that has been learned is reflective in the same respect someone else could generally relate to, given no one's going to point out the articulation in each individual's voice, rather than settle for the thought that it's possible for any two voices at random, and of course through trial and error, to be the same or similar, to generally resemble. Personally, I prefer to think of my own voice unlike any other, simply in the sense that when I am in a state of thought about me, everything is about me and everything is mine. What could we possibly be doing? One of two things: thinking about oneself all of the time we'd be in thought about self, or thinking about oneself in relation to what someone else thinks about or has thought about. Dreaming. It's not wrong. It's not bad. I just don't think it's necessarily dependable when working with others. To assert the versatile method of critical thinking is not, in my opinion, asserting, applying, or implying any aspect of critical thinking skills. I don't think that's cause and effect. That's back to what was said early on. It's what's within us. It's one of the elemental factors that we produce when we generate something like energy. Those hormones that work, they don't come in a physical form. If there's an extraction made of a hormone, it's been mixed so that it's tolerable. It's been diluted if it's a liquid. Of course, that's the only thing we can extract. It's been mixed with something. It's like for a sore throat or a scratchy throat, what really is going to take care of it is salt. That's one thing. Well, we don't just want to take salt by instructions itself and just cast down the throat. Mix the salt with water. And the idea is so that we can comfortably experiment with these things and experience these things. Because given is that the solution is the solution for better or for worse. That is, that the water is not going to lessen the active agent that salt contains. One may think so virtually because it's mixing, that it changes. It changes, maybe, and it changes, maybe not. Something like salt, something like water. Which one is the strongest? I think salt and water are equivalent. Salt is probably a water or liquid that's solidified, which isn't a liquid anymore, but it's a liquid that has solidified, given its story is told. And water too is just like salt that's not solidified, and it's water or liquid, as long as it's H2O, which means it's combined with something else. H2O, hydrogen. I'm not going to tell you the rest, but the acronym, if you will, H2O, abbreviation wise, is equivalent to water. Doesn't mean it's water, but you decide if H2O is water or if H2O is equivalent to water on your own, as I'm going to do. Moving along, we learn, but we still have to do what it takes to recover from our experiences. They don't have to be so severe that we've got wounds. That's severe. Scars, damage is what the key thing is. We always accumulate some level of damage, and we stand always a chance of being in danger, but that's further along. That's what we try to prevent, the case of danger. So, where we learn, we should dwell instead of meditate. Dwell. That's open-rounded. It's not really calling for intense thought, intrinsic motivation, or less thought than normal, or extrinsic motivation. Either a growth mindset or a fixed mindset can dwell and get the same result. That's what's so enjoyable about critical thinking to discussion, in my opinion. It's all about things, given those things have undergone some level of articulation. That is, we've thought about those things with the best method we know. Silence, quiet, and kinesthetic. We've taken in what we hear in our mind, in our head, to compare whether it is or whether it isn't this thing that's making the bigger attention or attraction than we are. There's that sound in the head. We know that's not what we each think our internal body sounds like. We each think my body sounds like nothing. It's silent. It's not quiet. It's not peaceful. It's not calm. It's quiet. It's not sweet. It's not bitter. It's not ironic. It's not sarcastic. It's not inverse. It's not humorous. It's silent. And all these things around are what I hear in my head when I'm in homeostasis and I'm breathing calm in and out. That sounds like, and my brain just processes. And if it was up to me, my brain would leave that subject alone and think on processing a different object than that sound, something else. It would if we could get out of sound, but we're in sound, and that's what we hear. And no one knows what it is, because it could be either of anything that through either of our five senses we'd infer that it is. Well, the truth is we don't have the time span in which we apply our attention to really govern sound, as we possess the gift of sound through our sense of hearing, and we enhance it along the other four senses as proportionately we do throughout each sense onto the five in total. So when we're trying to learn and do things, sometimes we understand when that's difficult without pointing the finger at who's instructing us or teaching us. We can accept it inevitably from within. There is already the substance therein that I don't have the energy to describe, thus explain, because it's intersecting where my senses are. I hear it within. It's not within a freedom bell. Dun, 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 dun. It's not inside of my body. A whistle. It's not inside of my body. A violin, woo, with some tremolos, woo, it's not inside of my body. But the sound that is inside of my body engulfs that sound retrospectively as is instructed or as is taught from the general standpoint of either of those objects that anyone could possibly raise in discussion and attempt to explain or define or make some understanding of for someone else. There's already this sound, if we're coincidentally, generally talking on the subject of learning, going to have to understand how something sounds ultimately before we can accept how it's going to be explained or described in someone else's words, other than ourselves, that is, articulated. And that sound, it's why I feel like learning sometimes, according to someone else's method or idea, and why I feel comfortable learning at other times from someone else. At the end of the day, for better or for worse, I'm always learning. That's what each of us has to say within. I am always learning. So what are we doing with learning? Then I'm going to explain or describe what we're doing when we're learning from here. We're each practicing on doing something we personally know how to do better than we do at the moment. It's not long term. It's not over a period of 2 weeks or 3 months or 2 months or 3 weeks. At the moment, momentously, that's just how powerfully busy our brain is processing things. We are in the belief, and we're frankly in the habit of thinking that our brain processes non-stop. Its function is processing things. That's not true. We always have the option to perceive one's own body as a totally separate object or framework from anything else that has articulation in its structure, or that's just normally been articulated to us. We always have that alternative, and it's not cause and effect. It's not a pros and a cons, positive, negative, a learn from experience status of a thing. It's physiology at large. The only reason we share is to establish for each other, give someone's going to be able to understand that we don't have to continue to teach each other things for the purpose of constituting learning in culture, a cultural sense, to constitute a cultural pattern or a cultural image. That's why we do things together. People, as humans, in the beginning met and did not meet to teach or to learn. Teaching has come later. Learning has been always something, as we understand the vocabulary word learning, we've been doing before we learned about the brain. All of this is about energy. And frankly, I suspect since we have learned about these things, we've modified our own dimension, and we've grown further away from truth than we were early on. Not to mention the misperception of the information and how many different directions that's led us to. The stalemate we just might be in. I suspect we are in a stalemate, and we're modifying things in the meantime. We're also caught in the meanwhile. Energy, 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 energy. 0, 0, 0, 0. That's possible. That's possible. Because numbers don't necessarily go in one direction or another. Numbers are unidirectional, if you will. They go, and that's it. They just go. Just like the alphabet. It's possible to educatedly spell, and that's as far as we are able to use the alphabet. We don't even use the numbers. This is another thing I'm going to assume we are all rather or prefer to think or ponder personally. Can we spell the numbers? Whether or not we want to use vocabulary, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to attempt to imply, and I'm not going to assert further than it to question this time around. But I'll have in one hand, figuratively speaking, a ball of energy as my hand expands my fingers and thumbs apart, and in another hand I not use my whole hand, one may assume, but just my index finger and my thumb, that also has, in my opinion, the exact same ball of energy. That's where I'm going to leave this conversation for the moment. That's a clue.